we've got to take your word. Your team faithfully, accurately, impartially, and completely described all of the underlying evidence in the Mueller report. And we're finding more and more instances where this just isn't the case. And it's starting to look like, having desperately tried and failed to make a legal case against the president, you made a political case instead. You put it in a paper sack, lit it on fire, dropped it on our porch, rang the doorbell, and ran.
I don't think you reviewed a report that is as thorough, as fair, as consistent as the report that we have in front of us.
Now, that GOP congressman accusing Bob Mueller of playing politics today and also punting decisions to Congress. And speaking of Congress, the legislative branch has its hands full with Trump-related investigations. At last count, there were 11 active probes, all listed there on your screen, including possible obstruction, hush money payments, possible money laundering, and more, a lot more. Well, joining me now to discuss where Congress goes from here is former Congressman Chris Bell, Democrat from Texas. He served on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Also, he's a Senate candidate in 2020. Congressman, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, let me ask you, because at last count this afternoon, roughly 92 Democrats in the House and not a single Republican, I guess with the exception of Amash, who's now identifying himself as of neither party, are pushing for impeachment. Do you think the needle moved at all? And if you were still in Congress, would you say we've reached a time where we need an impeachment inquiry?
Well, I think part of the Democratic goal today, whether it would immediately lead to impeachment at this point, I think most people are going to hold their positions on that. But obviously, what the Democrats were trying to accomplish today was to get as much of this information before the American public as possible. And I think one of the more clever things I've read leading up to the hearings was someone who said, for those who don't read the book, perhaps they'll watch the movie. And that was obviously the goal. For those who have not read the Mueller report, get as many of the details out in the open as possible and have Director Mueller confirm those details. And I think they accomplished that.
You know, a lot of people are saying, Congressman, that the book was better than the movie in that, Mr. Mueller, by almost all accounts, didn't have the best of days, whether it was intentional or not. The biggest moment, he ended up walking back after the first break. To that end, the only thing I believe that might move Democrats today was what we just saw of the president doing a victory lap before flying off to a fundraiser this afternoon with zero contrition and zero, I think, acceptance of some of the substantive things we learned today from Mueller himself. That's the only way that I see, given that the public, I think it's about 60% almost here, are not too crazy about the idea of impeachment. That's about the only thing. Trump just couldn't keep quiet here and leave well enough alone after today. Other than that, I don't see the Democrats moving in a big way. Do you think I'm wrong?
Well, I wouldn't completely agree with you because I think there were different agendas, and I would certainly agree with you that it wasn't the most gripping television that anyone has ever seen. And most of the time that when you have a hearing, there's going to be back and forth, and the witness is going to be able to engage a great deal more. Robert Mueller was very constrained and restrained in what he was saying and what he was allowed to say and what he was going to say. And as a result of that, there wasn't a whole lot of new light coming forth. I think a big part of the Republicans' goal was to make Mueller seem almost like beneath the law, and this entire investigation was beneath the law. But trying to make Robert Mueller seem beneath the law is kind of like trying to make Elliot Ness seem beneath the law, and I don't think they accomplished that.
You know, we spoke a little earlier to Liz Holtzman. Obviously, she draws the parallel to Watergate and remembers her time in Congress at that pivotal moment. I'm curious, you're of a more recent vintage, even going back 15 years. The partisanship and the lack of an appetite on the other side of the aisle, given that this has, nonpartisan impacts of election meddling, election security, arguably high crimes and misdemeanors. Was it just as bad when you were there, or do you recognize this, Congress, from even your time, which wasn't that long ago?
It was not as bad, and especially not on the Intelligence Committee. I didn't serve on Intelligence, but it was one of the more bipartisan committees back in the day. But this sort of partisanship was already beginning.
That said, there's one thing about not sticking your neck out, but when you listen to, and obviously you know Louis Gohmert, but him and Jordan and Nunes, they didn't forget about, try and do any fact-based investigation. They were leading that this was some form of a cabal and that they were trying to go basically break out your tinfoil hats for these conspiracy theories instead of using any time to do anything other than trying to discredit Mueller here and the whole prosecutorial team. That to me was beyond the pale.
No, I would agree with you. And I like I said, I just don't. I think that was a failed effort. I think that Robert Mueller is a very well-respected individual. He wouldn't have been appointed by so many Republicans if Republicans didn't trust him. And I think there's a lot of trust on the Democratic side for Bob Mueller as well. And so I just think that was sort of a misguided goal, if you will.
Do you think the American public's sick and tired, though, of the probes? And by that I mean, I listed there's as many as 11 ongoing investigations in Congress relating to some shape or form of this president and possible criminality. Do you think the Democrats are going to look at today and maybe pare that list back or pursue it with less vigor because they think that there's, a fatigue level of the American public?
No, because it goes back to what I was saying before. The voters won't stand for that. They want this. And on the Democratic side, there is a great deal of dislike for Donald Trump. In my way of thinking, justified dislike for Donald Trump. Nobody has ever seen a presidency like this, and we're cannot believe what we're seeing. And so there's a loud push to consider impeachment, and there's certainly a loud push to keep these investigations going and to bring forth as much information as possible. So this isn't going away anytime soon.
Well, I'll leave you with this question. Would you be more surprised if we had an impeachment inquiry before the 2020 elections, or would you be more surprised if we didn't?
I don't see it. I think Speaker Pelosi has made it rather clear she doesn't want to go down that road. The last impeachment vote did not have a great deal of support. So no, I don't think you're going to see it. And I think a lot of people would view it as a distraction going into 2020. Many people still remember what happened back when the Republicans impeached Bill Clinton. That did not work out well for the Republican Party at all in that election. There are several Democrats in the House still serving who were brought into the Congress because of what happened after that impeachment effort. So those memories are still around, and I don't think a lot of them want to have that distraction heading into 2020.
Good enough. Well, I appreciate your time today, Congressman, and also best of luck in the coming election.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for having me.
And we'll be right back to wrap things up.